Hello everyone and welcome to my epilogue episode of Super Mario RPG. This was a very interesting YouTube series to create, and honestly I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I had actually played Super Mario RPG after playing Jurassic Park for Super Nintendo, and so essentially I had way too much ambitious ideas to how to advance to the next level. So I had already played extensively around with the use of overlays in Jurassic Park, and so I thought, well, I could extend this idea even further in Super Mario RPG. However, this did pose a problem because my overall experience with video editing was not super advanced, and so I kept putting this project off. But honestly, I am so happy that I did continuously kick this down the road, so to speak, and cut. Before cutting Super Mario RPG footage, I'm so thankful that I cut all of the footage for Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Star Fox 64, Pokemon Snap, Space Station Silicon Valley, Banjo-Kazooie, Zelda Ocarina of Time, and finally Jet Force Gemini. I'm afraid that had I did this series before all of that, it would have been horrendously boring. In fact, my original idea was to have essentially the entire dump of all raw video, kind of like all of the series up to this point. Especially look at Jurassic Park, it's a direct dump of the entire playthrough. Virtually nothing is cut out from that. And I had wanted to create like a full 100% playthrough of this game, showing off all of the multiple branching paths as well, and even, get this, I even wanted to include all of the battle footage, which essentially has completely been cut. The interesting thing with this is I actually only spent 4 days in real life playing through Super Mario RPG. 4 days! And by the time I was getting to the end, I was almost sad because I didn't get to fully enjoy the music or the characters or the story. It seems like it was over in the blink of an eye. However, the cut time took me several months to completely get through a meager 13 hours of footage, mind you, which I was able to do so 9 months later from the initial playthrough. Speaking of that raw video, it's interesting because yes, there was just over 13 hours of raw video, but it took so much work to edit how I wanted to have that story presentation. Approximately 65% of all of the footage was cut. And unfortunately, a lot of that was somewhat interesting commentary, some dialogue, some stories, but ultimately didn't fit. And in fact, I pretty much did almost every single side quest in this entire game. However, most of it was cut. By the end of this episode, I wanted to show off just a few other really cool side quests that I did, but didn't make the final cut, and I want to show that off as far as other cool things that this game features. I would say the biggest downfall when it came to me attempting to cut this series, which was arguably my, favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, is that my ideas and scope were unfortunately just way too ambitious. I ended up having to scale my ideas back significantly even after the months and months of experience of video editing, graphic designing, overlay, underlay, everything, you name it. Still, I realized that if I were to actually get this done, which I really wanted to, because it's time to get this done, it had to get done. And so I had to cut some corners and scale some things back. But even so, if you look at all of the things that I had to design, I remember spending, 30 minutes, an hour designing this original overlay screen, which was like this nice feature that you have the title screen, you have my name down in the in-game font, RPG Fan 128, you have my decorated Wyoming cowboy, and despite all of this, intricate design, it's really just the title screen background imagery. And I realized that as I played through the game, this overlay would actually somewhat detract and not match from the numerous tile sets in the game. So this original idea hit me where I thought, well, I should probably then have a different overlay for every different area I go to. That way, not only the overall aesthetic of the overlay matches, but also it kind of gives the player, something visually stimulating so that they're not staring at the same static image for however long the series lasts. This presented some interesting problems though, because there are a lot of overlays I needed, and especially as we start adding elements and aspects to the overlay itself, such as the boss fights that we complete, or the stars we collect, or even the split timers, I ended up having to design and create 122 overlay images, which, let me tell you, was a massive undertaking, a massive amount of work. And when it came to each individual segment of video, sometimes from where that segment began, sure, it might be in some tile set, some location, but when it ended, it's in a completely different area. So our intro and outro images, sometimes you could not have one single image to encapsulate the entire video of that specific series. So essentially, even though some videos do have the same overall picture from the intro and outro, I had to make sure that the intro and outro images fit with the overall playthrough and overall presentation of the series. So that said, I had to design 43 distinct intro and outro images. One thing that I had a lot of fun with that is that as the story progressed, right, and as we encountered all of our lovable characters, they got added to our intro and outro images, almost as like a greatest hits collection, so that by the end of the game we have all of the best characters there, still reminding you that they were an amazing part of this game. I wanted to delve into using animated GIF imagery in my various overlays, which was, in my mind, kind of that next step from all of the static imagery and complex overlays that I did in Jurassic Park. So I remember spending probably, honestly, several weeks on my very first Super Mario RPG episode as more of a proof of concept. I was trying to do lots of things and really essentially gauge how long will it take me to do this. I had already talked and read basically the entire dialogue in the game, and so in post I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting, or in fact better, to have like a female voice actress overdub Princess Toadstool's lines. Well, this was a great attempt. I even did this on the very first episode, but alas, it was way too time consuming. I likened it to attempting to remove the sugar out of a cake that you have already baked. Chemically speaking, this is possible, but man, it's going to be a lot of work, when how simple it is before you're making the cake, just not put in the sugar. So this kind of clued me into, hey, if I'm going to be presenting a story-driven narrative of RPG series in the future, I really need to zip the lips and add the voice acting later in the editing. During my proof of concept, remember, I was initially going to have all of the battles even, as boring as that would be. In our first introductory video, which goes from the beginning of the game, the cinematics, to the first Bowser fight, I essentially was skipping all of the battles just by virtue of the experience doesn't matter. It's almost scripted for you to get through there. So this was actually an interesting realization of that first proof of concept video. There was essentially not any random battles, because my original idea was to have every single battle that you do have an animated GIF of the enemy or enemies that you're fighting. So even in that first segment, Terrapin, I had created an animated GIF of Terrapin to use. I understood that this idea, although really awesome, was A, way too ambitious. This would have taken me years to cut all of the video, and also B, remember, this was still under the ideology of having a full dump, which honestly I don't think would ever be a good idea. All of the random battles and experience definitely needs to be cut from a final YouTube series of such. So that said, I ended up only creating animated GIFs for all of the boss fights, which in themselves were, nicely edited and cut in a nice fast-paced way. But 53 animated GIFs I had to create from a total of 196 static image frames, which honestly is certainly not bragging, because if you look at a game like this, where sometimes any individual enemy or any individual boss has a massive amount of distinct frames. Now, of course, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Once you have a basic sprite for, say, an enemy or a boss that you want animated, you can like slightly change things so that it appears moving, or you only have to design or add a few things, or a claw, or a different shape, or a different position. So it wouldn't be just because maybe, say, look at the boss of Smithy, which requires a ridiculous amount of sprites. You don't have to design every single frame from scratch. You only have to have the base, and then you can use that base to power through and make large assortment of various individual sprite frames. What this helped me appreciate, though, is back in this era and generation of video games, it's so different than it is today by virtue of back then it was like this expression of art. And if you look at video games today, sure, it's way easier to just, bam, have a computer generated model. Same thing with movies. It's just so much easier to, hey, let's just pretend like we're doing something in this acting scene, and then we're going to be on a green screen. All of your background is just going to get added later. All of the enemies are just going to be added with CGI later. It's no big deal. All we need is the humans doing their lines and pretending they're being scared of a dinosaur that's actually not there. But you lose so much. And looking at, say, classic video games where there are just like even hand-drawn games like Monkey Island, or sprite-based games where every single thing had to be artistically accentuated in the whatever technology, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, you name it. Or if you look at the movie industry, where how can you create something with practical effects, or even various other things, dying arts such as puppetry or animatronics. I have such deep respect for those who don't run home to mama and only use CGI, or only use green screen backgrounds, or only use the powerful tools that we have of 3D modeling and software in video games, to kind of forget the fact that video games, in some sense, are also an art. And I think that is being lost these days, not only in video games, but in the movie industry as well. In closing, here are a few very interesting side quests that did not make the final cut. Toadofsky and also Frogfucius's pupil. You meet Toadofsky originally in Tadpole Pond, but Toadofsky has 3 interesting and fun musical quests where if you are exploring and talking to the people, essentially you have to figure out what tune he is searching for. You have to figure out where that tune can be found in the game, and then you use the tadpoles as notes on a score to be able to play the song that he wants played. Raz and Rainy were originally found in the Mushroom Kingdom, and you cross paths with them, you hear their story, and it becomes so much more meaningful by the time you get to Marrymore and they're the ones getting married, that you feel for them. Whereas in the final YouTube cut, it's almost as if we get to Marrymore and I mention, oh look, it's Raz and Rainy who are getting married, which to the viewer makes no sense because they have not been featured in any of the previous footage. I was kind of sad even Croco has a little bit more character development that didn't make the final cut. You can encounter him a 3rd time, even though it's not a 3rd boss fight. In Nimbus Land, you encounter him trying to steal from one of the empty homes, and this is where you get the signal ring, which is the item that enables you to find all of the hidden chests. Did you know that there is actually a hidden casino in this game? Not only is it a secret how you get the membership card, but it's also a secret how you unlock the area in the world map that goes to the casino itself. After you play Booster Hill and have the mini game of the barrels, the sniffets, trying to rescue the princess from Booster, That mini game in itself is completely done. You can never play that version again. However, once you save the town of Seaside, you can purchase a Beetle box and go to Booster Hill to play a nice fun mini game of trying to catch beetles. Honestly, in my original playthrough, even though this isn't the best place to farm for coins or frog coins, it's just pure distilled fun. I remember playing that over and over again for hours trying to catch beetles, and I got pretty stinking good at bouncing off of the barrels as well as the snippet heads and catching them little critters. Speaking of beetles, there is this kid playing video game in Mushroom Kingdom where you can keep talking to him and it distracts him and he's all sad because, oh man, you made him mess up. Well, at some point in the game, you can go back and buy the video game that he has conquered for 500 coins. Hilariously enough, his high score is 5,000. So I actually load this up very late in the game, showed off, didn't make the final cut obviously, but it is actually a really fun, kind of addicting game, and in my single attempt I actually broke, as you see here, a score of 10 million points. And the final side quest that I would like to feature, and then leave it as a mystery, as this beautiful scavenger hunt to the viewer, is that in Monstro Town, there is this little nook under the stairs where you can take a nap for free. However, while you are sleeping, you are encountered by the three musty ears. These scary creatures decide that they want to play a scavenger hunt with you. So they go off into the world and hide 3 flags that are hidden that you have to find. Now it is true, you can go and easily look up on this invention called the internet where the flags are hidden. But remember, once you know the solution, it's never going to be unknown to you. Have fun, see if you can figure out where are these flags hidden without looking up the solution or the locations on the internet. The flag is hidden behind a wooden flower. Another clue was between an O and an A. And finally, the flag is hidden under a green bed. So that's it. This concludes my Super Mario RPG series as well as my epilogue episode. I hope you all enjoyed it because I had so much fun playing it, listening to the music. So until next time, this is Great Games Before Your Time signing off.